Welcome back to the Fanspeak Network and another episode of Sibling Showdown. And this time, instead of a live draft, we are going to bring in some strategy sessions. And today we are going to talk about new offensive coordinators. That's right, strategy session time on the Sibling Showdown. I'm excited to learn from Steve in these because we are going to be talking different strategies each week. And today we're talking about something that's very important to me. We are talking about offensive coordinator changes and how that affects the offenses, which then how that affects our best ball decisions. So Steve, how are you doing today? And are you excited to talk about these, drop some knowledge on these offensive coordinator changes?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Doing well. And, it's these kind of things that can really make a difference. You look at last year, and if you were a believer in Bobby Sloak Jr., you
right.
bought into some Texans. If you were a believer in Dave Canales, who we're also going to be talking about, but with Tampa, you were buying into Baker and Mike Evans. And Mike Evans was such a value last year. People were totally overlooking him.
Yeah.
Richard White also. Guys like that, where if you bought in. And another change that people ignored was the Cowboys. Everyone thought they were going to become the most run heavy team of all time because Mike McCarthy made some offhanded comment about that. Dak threw the most touchdown passes in the league. So you just have to kind of really read between the lines and see what a team's really doing and how it's built and what they're built for, and what a strategy, offense coordinator strategy is. And if it can all get married together, you could really hit value.
Exactly. You give perfect examples there about especially the Texans, my God, but as you said, the Texans or the Dallas and not overreacting to McCarthy, these offensive coordinator changes that happen have a massive impact on the offense and then have a massive impact. It's not just wash and repeat for this next season, and it's going to have a massive impact on then what our decisions in best ball and we're obviously trying to make the right one. So we want to target the right offenses. We love team correlation and we want to target the right offenses. So that's what I'm looking to get out of this. And there were 13 offensive coordinator changes. So what we're going to do is we're going to briefly talk about 8, and then you're going to rank your top 5. So I'm just going to, in no particular order, go through the non-top 5, and you'll kind of give a quick summary on the offensive coordinator and kind of what you think about the state of that offense and how you're, maybe handling it in best ball is if you could frame each of these. And then when we get to the top 5, we'll probably spend a little more time. And let me be clear on these rankings, especially when we get to the top 5, or even as you're talking through, it's not ranking the coordinator itself. Like, we're Washington fans. We love Cliff Kingsbury. We're not ranking Cliff Kingsbury. We're ranking the offense as a whole, the coordinator with the personnel, with the offense, and its development and what it should look like because of the change and because of the marriage of the coordinator and the personnel. Right, Steve?
Exactly.
Any other thoughts on that before we get started?
Yeah, it's just, it might, and I'll mention it might benefit one or two particular players on a certain team. But, some of these, just because the state of where it's at, it's only going to go so far, even if it's a good OC change.
Right. So that's why the ranking of it, the impact of it, we're kind of ranking the impact of the offensive coordinator and the personnel and how that makes us like the offense, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that's a good way to frame it. So again, 13 offensive coordinator changes. This is in no particular order right now. I don't even know if this is alphabetical. No, this is in no particular order. This is just a list of offensive coordinator changes right now until we get to the top 5. So the first one I'm going to mention is, of course, the Carolina Panthers. Dave Canales coming from Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Also, Brad Isaac, did I have that right? Is going to be the offensive coordinator under him.
Yeah, and I think Isaac will be the one calling the plays, but it sounds like both will be kind of making up the game plan and all that.
Right. And we know from the past of Dave Canales 2 years ago, obviously with Seattle, and what he did for Geno Smith last year, what he did for Baker Mayfield with the Buccaneers. He's getting that name of the quarterback whisperer. Can he do it for Bryce Young is everybody's question. What do you think? Can he do it for Bryce Young? And give me what you think about this situation.
Yeah, I think overall it's a major plus for the Carolina offense and Bryce Young, and not just that, they've obviously added weapons, they've
Yeah.
bolstered the offensive line. So I think Arrow's looking up. It's just this team just has a long ways to go. But I think Arrow's looking up for Young and some of the pass catchers, obviously Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, maybe Jatavian Sanders, and running backs. But I like Canales, and we'll see Isaac. But I still think Young and this offense is probably bottom third of the league.
So even bottom third of the league, though, I know we just took them in a live draft that we did here on the Fanspeak Network. Check that out if you haven't already. I've taken plenty of Bryce Young stacks already because you can get them so late. I assume you still like Bryce Young to take a step under a Dave Canales offense, and in this offense, you are still interested in these weapons for the value you're getting for it.
Yeah, and that's the good news is nobody's too expensive,
Right.
which is nice.
Right. Okay. So bottom line, we need like a bottom line summary for all. We're interested in this offense at their current prices, basically, because there will be an upgrade. Okay. Next is the Chicago Bears. Again, no particular order right now. Chicago Bears and Shane Waldron. So obviously we've got Caleb Williams and a stable of weapons that they brought in through free agency and the draft. What do you think about Waldron and the Bears, and how are you handling it in best ball?
So yeah, Waldron coming over from Seattle. Last year was a bit of a down year. He lost Canales as the kind of quarterbacks coach, passing game coordinator, who'd been the previous couple of years, and Canales had taken some other pieces. So it wasn't the best year. Also, Seattle had a ton of injuries along the offensive line, and that may have played into it as well. But yeah, you got to love what they've done to surround Caleb Williams. Seattle's offense has been pretty good. Also, Pete Carroll, as people have always said, maybe kind of held Waldron in check a little bit of being too conservative at times. So maybe Waldron opens it up a little bit more that he didn't in the past under Pete Carroll. So I'll be interested to see. The weapons are there. This offense could go to the moon if Williams hits like Stroud did, because the weapons are better than Stroud had last year.
Right. So bottom line is, and I know this just from, again, doing drafts with you or talking about drafts with you, you are in on this Chicago offense. And
yeah.
Waldron. Okay.
Yeah. It's more expensive than Carolina for sure, but it could be well worth it.
Okay. The next one we'll talk about is the Cleveland Browns and Ken Dorsey, but you made a note, Kevin Stefanski is still likely to be calling the plays. So talk to me about that and how it affects your best ball decisions.
Yeah, Alex Van Pelt's moving over to the Patriots. We'll talk about him in a second. Dorsey coming over, former Bills OC. Dorsey had some good offenses with the Bills, so I think it's a good thing to get him in the building. We'll see if he can unlock Deshaun Watson.
Is he the one that got fired last year from the Bills? I'm sorry, I'm trying to. Okay,
yes.
Got it. Okay.
So this one I'm a little more unsure of, just because we don't know what Watson's coming back from a major injury. We just haven't seen it with Watson the last couple of years. Obviously, some core weapons are there. Chubb, though, coming back from a major injury himself. Right. I have a tougher time with this offense in general. Stefanski, has been better of late, but he's had a mixed career. Yeah, I know they love him overall as a coach, but just a mixed career as an offensive play caller. So I'm a little bit more hesitant. Just I want it to be proven, just because you do pay a decent price on guys like Cooper and Njoku. They're going to need Watson and this offense to be pretty good to pay off.
Right, and that's something I have been clicking Cooper. I mean, I don't have a ton of them, but I have probably more than I would intended to, just because he's in that range where it's like, well, I see his upside maybe more than some of the guys going around him. And so I think I'm nervous. It's like I guess like you'd say almost like an uncomfortable click for me sometimes. I'm wary about Deshaun Watson. So this one you're not as high on in total and aren't really getting a ton of the Cleveland stacks, basically.
Yeah. And honestly, it's not even so much the coordinator change. I don't know. It may help, it may hurt, because again, Stefanski is kind of the constant there.
Sure.
But it's just not knowing what we're getting with Watson.
I believe he just got an extension too.
Stefanski did, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make that point. Okay, well then we'll skip to the next one because you just mentioned his name. Patriots, Alex Van Pelt. Obviously, we have a rookie quarterback in Drake May. Don't know when he'll start. Very young, offensive weapons there too. So what do you think about Alex Van Pelt, the Patriots as a whole, and how you're handling them in best ball?
So again, the interesting thing, Van Pelt coming over from the Browns, I believe it was Ramondre Stevenson. Somebody kind of came out and said we're basically running the Browns offense, and that's definitely a good thing for Hunter Henry. David Njoku is very involved. If we figure out who the true X receiver is, Amari Cooper's role is very involved.
Yeah.
And so if that ends up being Jalen Polk, that's a good thing.
Right.
What is interesting, of course, is who will be the quarterback. Jacoby Brissett has some experience with Van Pelt a couple years ago in Cleveland.
Yeah.
So he definitely could get the starting nod at the jump. But, Drake May is probably taking over at some point. I expect it to be more of a run-heavy offense. They brought in Antonio Gibson to go along with Ramondre Stevenson, so they can kind of go two backs, and both very capable out of the backfield. So, and as we saw in Cleveland, they like throwing to a secondary back. Kareem Hunt always had that role. Both Ford and Hunt, after Chubb went down this year, were catching passes. So, yeah, I expect the backs to be involved. I expect Hunter Henry to be the biggest beneficiary, and maybe if we figure out who the X receiver is.
Are you taking Drake May at all late in drafts? It's something that I hadn't done much yet, just a little bit. And it's something I'm considering more in, of course, 3 quarterback builds where I feel really good about the other 2. I can see just that rushing upside late in the season.
Yeah. He is considered Josh Allen light, and we see what Josh Allen even did as a rookie. Josh Allen had some 30-point spike weeks. So, I don't mind it.
Because you're getting in the 17th round,
Yeah, you're getting it the second to last or last round.
Yeah.
And especially if you're pairing him with Henry or Polk, who you're getting late as well. So just your total investment into that stack is so low.
So cheap. Yeah.
Even if it fails, it's not gonna kill you. And likely, like a Henry or a Polk will probably get you a couple of decent weeks anyway. So even if May totally fails. So it's not like you'll get nothing from that stack.
Right. We're through 5 teams already. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed to Fanspeak Network, be sure to subscribe. We do 4 to 5 live drafts every week, and we're going to be doing more of these strategy shows every single week, and strategy shows and shorts every single week as well, too. And of course, plenty of free basketball content over on fanspeak.com. Okay, Steve, we'll go to the next team. Again, these right now are in no particular order. The Raiders and Luke Getsy. Getsy came over from the Bears. Okay. Yeah. So obviously the Raiders quarterback situation, you have Aiden O'Connell, you have Gardner Minshew. So nothing super exciting there, but you do still have massive weapon in Devontae Adams. They drafted Brock Bowers. You have Zamir White now in the running back role. There are best ball players to talk about. So what do you think about the offensive coordinator situation? And then how are you handling it for the Raiders in best ball?
So this is probably in terms of definitely coordinator name recognition, the least exciting, because obviously Luke Getsy was not very exciting for the Bears. But the one interesting thing is he does have a connection to Devontae Adams because Getsy came from the Packers. So I could not that Adams didn't get a ton of targets last year, but what Adams did lack was he lacked red zone targets. He lacked end zone targets. We saw a lot of times last year, and also catchable end zone targets. If you remember, a lot of Jimmy Garoppolo targets to Adams were nowhere near him. So I could see that Getsy really prioritizes getting the ball to Adams inside the red zone. It definitely makes me like Adams more. He knows the strengths of Adams.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And in terms of Bowers, White, Jacoby Myers, they're fine. None of them are too cost prohibitive, but this is a worrisome offense in general. Devonta Adams, I think, is going to get 150 targets again. He's gotten 175 the last couple of years. Probably will get around that again. And hopefully this year, just more end zone targets, unlike he had last year.
Okay. So really, in terms of the Raiders and best ball, don't feel super warm and fuzzy about Luke Getsy, but you definitely like Devontae Adams and the
Yeah,
Yeah, what's
I
going
like that there's the connection
inside.
there, and you know, I mean, look, the Raiders are going to live and die. Yes, they're going to want to run the ball, so I think Zamir White's going to get plenty of work, but they're going to live and die by how well Devontae Adams is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think obviously the usage and the talent is there for him. So
Yeah.
I know I've still taken Devontae Adams, but not enough actually quite yet, but still early in best ball season. So plenty of time there. All right, on to the next one. We have the Chargers and Greg Roman. Obviously, he brought over some Ravens, old Ravens. He used to be the old Ravens offensive coordinator. Was that 2 years ago, Steve?
Yeah.
2 years ago, yeah. And then of course we have Harbaugh. It has his stamp on the offense as well. So tell me about the Chargers offensive situation as a whole and how you're handling that.
Well, and Roman was Jim Harbaugh's offense coordinator for the 49ers last time Jim Harbaugh was in the NFL.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I remembered or realized that.
Yeah, so the connections go way back,
Yeah.
and the thing is, you look at Roman, and basically, his offenses. So it's an interesting thing. The worry is with Justin Herbert because his offenses never rank high passing. His offenses always rank very high rushing, and his offenses always rank very high scoring.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for Justin Herbert? Now, now he's never had a quarterback like Justin Herbert, obviously.
Right.
Even with, it was Alex Smith, Kaepernick when he was with the Bills. I can't even remember who the quarterbacks were those 2 years. It was not anywhere near as good.
Pre-Allen years, who cares?
And then of course Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson is an MVP quarterback, but he does not throw the ball 40 times a game. So we'll see if he adjusts a little bit, for his personnel. But what I obviously think the best thing is for 1,000% is Gus Edwards and any running back, speculative running back, whether they're taking Dobbins, whether they're taking Vidal. And tight ends have always been prominently featured. Unfortunately, they don't have a tight end that we love.
No, not at all.
I don't love guessing on this. I would think
not this point of the year. Maybe when we know more in August.
Yeah, I would think Harbaugh, kind of has that one receiver who kind of always sticks out, and I'm going to guess that's McConkey, maybe Josh Palmer. So those are the two guys I'm focusing on. I'm not really looking to go deeper than that, because I do think passing volume gets cut back a little bit, even if it's more than what we saw with the Ravens or more what we saw with the 49ers.
I think that's a great point. And then it's the price you pay in best ball, right? And the price you're paying for Justin Herbert right now is just too cheap. We just talked about it. Yeah. Justin from our team drafted a Herbert stack, and it's like he went past his ADP and he got him in the late 140s or something. That's just late 130s, something like that. Too cheap for Justin Herbert. So even though you're concerned about the passing volume in this particular offense, like you said, they still score a lot. So you still think, and they've never had a quarterback like Justin Herbert necessarily, that maybe they can marry that together for Justin Herbert to have a ton of, fantasy success.
Yeah.
Or certainly out to perform that way too cheap of a price.
Oh, for sure. I think he's being undervalued in best ball.
Okay, so you're trying to definitely grab shares of Herbert and stacks at this price while you can. Okay, that's what I'm trying to do as well. And so I definitely wanted to make that point. 2 more before we get to our top 5 of Steve's coordinator change rankings. And the next 2 before we get to the top 5 is, and these again are in no particular order, is the Eagles and Kellen Moore coming over from the Chargers. He was the Cowboys and Chargers, and now the Eagles, and working with Jalen Hurts. So this is, they were definitely kind of, and it was a concern of mine. And actually I made this point with the guys, Tyler and Spread, on some betting shows last year. And I said, listen, I don't know. They lost, help me remember the Colts coach's name. Shane Steichen. Yeah. Shane Steichen, former Philly offensive coordinator, goes to Indy and honestly looked quite good to start. I think he had a great rookie coaching season in Indy, considering he lost his starting quarterback and then had Minshew. So pretty impressive coordinator the year that Philly goes to the Super Bowl. They lose him, and it just wasn't the same last year. And I was worried that there was going to be a downgrade in that. And so to that point, they go out and they get Kellen Moore. So how are you handling the Eagles now?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you really have to like the Eagles because the offensive weapons are there. In fact, they're better. You're
You have
replacing
Barkley.
DeAndre Swift with Saquon, and they have deeper receiver room. They went out drafted some guys to get behind. Their top two. Obviously, it's the top two guys, Brown and Smith, but still Goddard. And they're losing Jason Kelsey, of course, along the offensive line. But this team is just stacked. And Kellen Moore, we saw his Dallas offenses were top 5 every year. Especially any time Dak was in the game, and then with the Chargers, I mean, up until the point Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen went out, they were an elite offense, and that's with Mike Williams going down after only a couple of weeks. That's with Austin Eckler missing considerable amount of time. That's with them missing multiple offensive linemen, Josh Palmer missing time. So imagine if those guys didn't get hurt. I think that offense would have continued to keep churning like it did through the first 10, 11 weeks.
So who do you prioritize? I mean, like you said, the Eagles are loaded with weapons.
Yeah, I mean, you're paying the price for all of them.
You pay a price for all of them. So do you prioritize any one over another? I mean, you're paying such a high price for them.
Yeah,
outside of Goddard goes.
I think the one thing I will say is Goddard might be a little bit more interesting. Obviously, we saw Dalton Schultz. Those Cowboy teams have some really good years with Dak.
Yeah.
Last year Gerald Everett and he
was ended up being disappointed, but disappointing.
But I could just see that Goddard is a more talented dude. So yeah, I could see Goddard getting some more opportunities, and he's gotten banged up these last 2 years. If he can stay healthy, he might really pay off.
Okay, so you like Goddard, but I mean, you just like the Eagles' offense as a whole, even though it is expensive.
Yeah, I think this year they can even more so pay off. I mean, obviously Brown and Hurts did and everything, but I think they can absolutely pay off their price.
Okay, once we get to the top 5, Steve, we'll actually rank them again. Right now, they're in no particular order. And again, we're looking at not ranking the coordinator itself, but the whole offense and coordinator as a whole and how it makes us kind of like the offense. So Commanders and our Washington Commanders, I hate the name Commanders, but Washington and Cliff Kingsbury. I think Cliff Kingsbury is a great offensive coordinator, obviously working with rookie Jaden Daniels. Obviously, they brought in some free agents like Austin Eckler, but you still have guys like Brian Robinson, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. So how are you handling Washington, and what do you think about? I mean, Brian Robinson came right out and said, we're running, basically no huddle offense, which isn't surprising with Cliff Kingsbury. So we're thinking fast pace. So that's intriguing in fantasy, you're getting more plays in. I think they're going to be more run heavy than people think. I don't think they're going to set people up, Daniels up to fail and drop them back like they did Sam Howell, 45 times a game. But let me hear what you think about Cliff Kingsbury on this offense.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. Well, I think Kingsbury, the pace will be there when they want it to be, and they probably will still be behind. They probably won't. A couple things. One, I don't think they'll be behind near as much as they were a year ago when their defense was arguably the worst in the league.
The worst, yeah.
And because Dan Quinn came in, and not only that, they added some defensive pieces. And I do think they will run the ball more between Daniels, Eckler, Brian Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to want to turn that clock, not have Daniels drop back, because Hal took a lot of sacks. I think the last thing they want is Daniels taking 60 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
This offensive line is the weakness of the team by far.
Big time.
And
they did not address that enough. Yeah.
And that is not Daniels' greatest strength, is feeling pressure and stuff like that. So, I just don't see them wanting to just let him get hit more and more. I do, I think Kingsbury is a positive. I think it helps. We've talked about before where Daniels is probably getting drafted a little too high. I think he's a spike week guy, but I think Kingsbury's pace of play helps ensure that some of the spike weeks will be there.
Right.
I think it helps Terry McLaurin for sure. We saw in Arizona, particularly DeAndre Hopkins.
The alpha eats. Yeah.
Yeah. Alpha definitely eats. I'm just not buying that the tight end, we know whether it be Ertz or Sinnott and how that split will go. In terms of the running backs, I think both are fine at value. I kind of prefer Austin Eckler a little bit more, but
Mm,
I think both are going to be fine.
yeah.
And I think Jahan Dotson's fine at where he's going right now. But it's not an offense I think you overly invest in, just because I think the offensive line is going to be a major drag on this team.
Okay. So you like Kingsbury, you like what he's doing for the pace
Yeah.
and for Daniels as a rookie and it kind of like from that picture. But as far as like from over investing in this offense, you're not going to over invest in the offense because I think we're so close to the team and maybe we're so close to the team that it hurts us more that we know that they address the offensive line a little bit in free agency. And I do think the center is a major upgrade.
Yeah.
But boy, those two tackles that could be just swinging gates. So
Yeah. Especially against like Philly and all three teams in the division have really, really strong D lines and going to get after it. So, yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So I mean, I just think I think that's the way I'm handling it too. I think Cliff Kingsbury is an upgrade. I think the whole pace is intriguing, but to overinvest in this offense makes me nervous. And I've seen people share drafts where they draft like Jaden Daniels and like 4 pass catchers, and I'm like, they ain't all getting there. I just
yeah.
don't see it in like this high volume passing offense. So if I'm drafting Jaden Daniels, I mean, you could draft him naked, honestly, but you could do it with just like a McLaurin or just like a Dotson or something
Yeah.
like that. I
Absolutely.
think that's absolutely fine. And I actually, like just the running game, whether it is Daniels or Eckler and Robinson. I just think at their price, I just think they're fair
Yeah.
prices. So, okay, Steve, now we're going to get to your top 5. And now I am going to go in order and kind of make this fun. So from 5 to 1, these are your top 5 offensive coordinator changes. And again, not just a coordinator, what it's going to do to the offense as a whole, like as an improvement and like making them intriguing in best ball. So number
Mhm.
5 is the Saints and Clint Kubiak coming over from San Francisco. I believe you said he was the passing game coordinator in San Francisco. Got the Kubiak name tied to the Shanahan tree. That all sounds good to me. Tell me why you like it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the Shanahan tree is kind of the, it's like just been gold of late,
Yeah,
whether
golden
it's
tree.
it's an offense coordinator like Bobby Slowick or head coaches like Mike McDaniel and the LaFleur and stuff like that. So it's just that's a big plus, and he's been around, and obviously his dad was coach and
Yeah.
quarterback back in the day. So just been around the game for forever, and yeah, I just like he's going to the Saints, and Saints I think are a little undervalued in the sense of this is a team that they were essentially a top 10 passing offense in every major passing stat, attempts, yards, touchdown percentage. Those are the ones that we care about in fantasy. And that's when we thought this was an anemic offense. And sure, if you watch the film, it was not pretty. They did not do things that we were thrilled with. And I just think there's going to be much more creativity in this with Kubiak coming from kind of having spent some time with Shanahan and that tree and seeing what they did in San Francisco. And of course, we see that with all these other teams when these OCs and head coaches go there. And the weapons are intriguing. Alvin Kamara can do things as a runner and out of the backfield, of course. Juwan Johnson is a tight end that we've seen have major spike weeks. And of course, the receivers, Chris Olave, sure, you're taking him early. But again, this team was taught, 10th or 11th in passing attempts last year. They could be throwing more this year. And completion percentage, they were like 7th last year in completion percentage. So, Carr is a very accurate quarterback. There's some issues that he needs to work on. I'm not saying he's an elite quarterback, but he can be a above average quarterback. And
And he's
Rashid
basically
Shaheed,
free at the end of
yeah, and
drafts. Yeah.
Rashid Shaheed is been a spike week guy all along. Now Michael Thomas is gone. Uh, so his opportunities go up. And then A.T. Perry, talk about free, you can get him in the last round. He basically didn't play until week 10 last year, and he only had like 22 targets. I think he had 12 catches, 240 yards, 4 touchdowns. a big 6'5" receiver. And yeah, I mean, he's not going to have that kind of ratio for a season, but they have nobody else behind those three guys.
Yeah.
So those are going to be the receivers. You know who's going to. They have size. They have some speed. In Shaheed, they have a dynamic playmaker in Kamara. They have an interesting tight end, Jawan Johnson. I think it could be a very condensed and interesting offense that is essentially free
So
outside
if
of
they
Olave.
using, like, kind of from that Shanahan tree, do you expect them to use more motion?
I would imagine so. It'll be interesting. Some Shanahan disciples use more two tight ends. I don't know if he will.
Mm-hmm.
Just given the receivers, they do have Foster Moreau's second tight end, so maybe they
Mm-hmm.
will. They still have Taysom Hill, but who knows how much that that whole
Yeah.
thing goes. And again, it's a new offense coordinator. He might not believe in the whole Taysom Hill project like like Carmichael did. So we'll see.
Yeah, the other follow-up question I had, because I'm literally trying to figure out how to apply this to best ball. So far, I've started to get interested based on what you've said, and just the Saints prices, and playing indoors, and the price, and
Yeah.
what you've mentioned about Kubiak as a coordinator, and being willing to kind of say this isn't going to be the same Carmichael offense. This is going to be an improved offense. So, like, give that a shot. What I've been given a shot is definitely Rashid Shaheed. Love that for the price you're getting him. Massive spike week guy already, and then now in a better offense. Definitely Derek Carr, like, free in the drafts, and Jawan Johnson. So far I've been in on those three. Haven't been able to pay the Chris Olave tax yet. There's just too many other guys that I just think he's going way too high. And then I really haven't gotten to Kamara, Kendre Miller. I know a lot of people are high on Kendre Miller. I mean, I can't imagine you have a ton of Chris Olave yet, just based on who he's going around, even though you like this offense. And then how are you handling Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller specifically as well? Because I'm trying to figure out what to do.
So I don't have a ton of Olave. I do have some. I've gotten just looking at it more interested, just given how much I think they will be able to throw in this offense. And but what I will say is I do like Kamara.
Okay. I haven't really been
Kamara,
taking him at all.
if you look at his numbers, even with him being suspended those first 3 weeks, he still finished very high. I can't remember his exact RB finish, but it was very high. And Miller, I know Miller was well ahead of Jamal Williams last year. Who's to say that will be the same thing this year?
I know a lot of people are high on Miller this year. So
yeah, and I get it. Like, people love second-year running backs like that.
Yeah.
But I just think Kamara, Kubiak is coming from Shanahan tree. The current Shanahan running back situation, they like throwing to a running back named Christian McCaffrey. The best comp to that in the league is Alvin Kamara in terms of pass catching running back. I mean,
that's true. This is making me more interested in that, because I have not given, like I said, so far I've just done the kind of the late passing attack stacks.
Yeah.
So this helps, and this is why we're doing this. So that was number 5, the Saints, Clint Kubiak. Now let's go to number 4, and this is another one that I was not at the start of basketball season. I was not in on, and you're starting to talk me into it a little more. And it is the Seattle Seahawks and Ryan Grubb coming from the college ranks at Washington. So fill us in on this and how you apply it to best ball.
Yeah. So, Ryan Grubb, most recently at Washington, and with name of the head coach escapes me, the new Alabama head coach, replacing Nick Saban. But he, his offense, extremely dynamic under Michael Penix, very deep ball centric, but that's always been Geno Smith's game. Geno, going back to his WVU games, could always just throw the ball deep. And he's developed into being a very accurate passer. Part of the issue last year was they did not throw the ball as deep as they, have necessarily in the past. So Seattle, and I think part of that was Seattle had a lot of offensive line issues.
Yeah.
There was a time where like 4 of their starters were out for at least one game, I believe. So if the O line stays healthy and they can protect Geno, They have three major weapons at receiver: DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and of course JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, their rookie from last year. That's what Washington had with Rome Dunze, Jalen McMillan, and Jalen Polk. And, those three receivers just absolutely dominated the Pac-12 and pretty much every team they played up until they faced the Michigan defense. Also, the other thing interesting about Seattle, obviously Kenneth Walker has been very good these 2 years. Running back was good at Washington with Dylan Johnson this past year. And I think it can be the same with Walker as well. He's got Charbonnet backing him up. And I think Charbonnet is an excellent handcuff running back. But Walker, with those three receivers, especially if they start really challenging vertically and getting those safeties to back up, we see Walker as one of the best home run hitting running backs in this league.
Yeah.
And if you give him space, boy, can he, make teams pay with some big chunk gains. So I really like that. And the other thing I think this could open up is an offense coordinator who also finally, and just with the way the personnel is now, get Noah Fant going. Noah Fant, since he was drafted out of Iowa, he's always had the promise. It's just never come through. But now, there's no Will Dissly, there's no Colby Parkinson. They drafted a tight end late, but it's Noah Fant's job, and he'll be out there way more than he has his previous couple years in Seattle. So I wouldn't be surprised you're getting him, in the 16th round.
Yeah.
So just a great tight end 3 to target.
So I have not been in on Seattle much yet in its entirety. Occasional Kenneth Walker, but and that's what I liked last year. I always felt like Metcalf was too high last year, and still do. But then I hear this, and I'm like, okay, could this be Metcalf break? What I'm doing is I'm taking some Walker and some Lockett, which is what I did last year, and that was fine. And so far I'm kind of doing that, but this makes me want to be open to taking more of the pass catchers, some Geno, some, like you said, some Noah Fant, even some Charbonnet. I think there was a coach speak index about the running game and not being shy about running it too. And because I think they think it's going to just be pass happy coming from Washington, but about the running game having success too. And even maybe passing out of the backfield that led to something positive about Charbonnet too. So it makes me want to be open to all these Saints weapons. It's hard. I haven't gotten there yet. I haven't built the trust up for it yet, but I know I need to. In fact, I've kind of been worried, geez, if Geno kind of starts last season like he ended, starts the season like he ended last season, is he like a bench risk? Because I think Sam Howell's solid, but if you believe that this coach could get the best out of Geno and a healthy offensive line, then that's intriguing for Geno as a late stack. I don't think I could over invest in this offense. I don't know that I have that confidence level, but it does make me consider this offense a lot more. How are you prioritizing it in best ball? Who would you say you're getting the most shares of at their price?
Well, what I'd say is very interesting is, Geno, obviously 2 years ago, you could get him extremely late because we didn't know if he or Drew Lock would win the battle. But then last year, he was kind of a mid quarterback. And this year, this offense could be the best it's been of the 3 years, and you're getting him again extremely late.
Yeah.
I obviously love stacking him with Lockett. Lockett's going the last of the 3 receivers. I like Fant as well because, again, he's going extremely late. So you can really double stack Geno with no investment, essentially, to be like a quarterback 3 stack. But I am taking some of all of them because I like them, and I do like Kenneth Walker. I really do. I think his upside is not as high as any running back in the league, but I think it's up there. If this offense clicks and going, he also was impacted last year, like I said, with the O-line issues. They had serious O-line issues early in the year.
Okay. No, and Walker was still, like you said, a home run hitter even at the end of the season. I remember him still coming through for me, even in the playoffs. I remember I had him in rookie sophomore and I needed him to score to make the semifinals, and he did. He had a big game. Yeah. So, no, I like Kenneth Walker a lot, and I do need to get behind this a little more. Last question I asked about the Seahawks specifically. Do you have any worry about coming from the college ranks? Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And, we've definitely seen some failure in that regard. Do you have any like apprehension about that?
Um, I think there's always a little apprehension.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I will say is, um, I think while he wasn't coming straight, he'd been in the NFL before. Last year, Todd Monken came from the college ranks,
Yeah.
and the Ravens offense was pretty good, and Lamar won
Yeah.
MVP.
Yeah.
So I mean, he had coached in the NFL before with the Bucks and Browns, but that was years ago. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I just I think the good news is, yes, like JSN's pretty young, but the rest of these guys have been around.
Mm-hmm.
Metcalf, Lockett, and Gino have all been around. So um, I think that helps. Like if it was a college coach coming in with a rookie or a second year
Yeah.
quarterback, that might be rough. But
Yeah.
coming in with a guy like Gino and some veteran receivers probably helps.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. This is helping me. So we're going to go to our number 3 ranked offensive coordinator change by Steve. And again, the whole picture. And that's Arthur Smith and the Steelers. So
Yeah.
obviously, Arthur Smith, the Steelers, he has 2 quarterbacks at his disposal. Obviously, Russ is the starting quarterback as of now, and I'm drafting him as such. And he's got plenty of weapons to work with. And then a newly drafted, replacement for Deontay Johnson, Roman Wilson, that I like a lot. There's a lot of Steelers pieces I like. How do you like Arthur Smith and the Steelers? Why do you have him ranked number 3? And how are you handling them in drafts?
Yeah. So I think people, there's a lot of Arthur Smith jokes that are out there because it didn't hit with the Falcons, obviously, and it's because the quarterback play never totally got there. I mean, we saw some spike weeks, 1 or 2 with Mariota, and then a couple last year with Ritter. I think Ritter in week like 15 had a spike week, 15 or 16 had a big spike week, and then 1 or 2 other earlier in the season. But yeah, I mean, he never had the quarterback play, but Arthur Smith had also. We need to remember his time with the Titans. Remember the Titans, and in that 2019-2020 window with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill had 26 starts, 10 starts in 2019, 16 starts in 2020. And in that time, Ryan Tannehill was one of the top fantasy quarterbacks in the league. He had, in those 26 starts, I believe he had 13 games of 20 or more fantasy points, including, I believe, 9 of those were 25 or more. So we're talking spike weeks. We're talking really good fantasy output there. And in his full season 2020, I think he was quarterback 7 that year. Russell Wilson is going as quarterback 32 in underdog right now. So we're just talking about a situation where at that time, Ryan Tannehill was considered dead to the league. Like he was considered a bust from the Dolphins. And, he was resurrected. Russell
Mm-hmm.
Wilson obviously has had a much higher career
Yeah.
leading up to this. And let's not forget that Russell Wilson last year, at the time that he got benched, week 16, and he got benched from a salary cap standpoint, because if he got injured, Broncos would have been on the hook for even more money. I mean, as much as they're paying right now for him to play for Pittsburgh, they'd be paying even more. At the time that he got benched, he was a top 10 fantasy quarterback. And
Yeah, I think people definitely forget that. Yeah.
yeah, and even if you look at points per game, he was 11th. So it's not like he was just benefiting by being healthy. He was right there. And yeah, and that's not in what we think was a very anemic offense. And Pittsburgh, they have potentially an elite receiver in George Pickens, a good young tight end in Pat Freiermuth, 2 really good running backs in Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, Roman Wilson, you mentioned, the rookie that they drafted. And here's the other thing that Denver definitely did not have is they've really bolstered the offensive line these past 2 drafts and in free agency. So I really like what Pittsburgh's been doing, and this is what Arthur Smith, and not just with potentially Russell Wilson and George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth and maybe Roman Wilson, but really the running backs. And I know everyone wants to hype up Jalen Warren. I think Jalen Warren is definitely draftable where he's going, but Najee Harris, I mean, do we not forget Derrick Henry, what he did? And Derrick Henry split time, split some time, with other running backs from Tennessee. And we saw obviously Bijan Robinson last year splitting time with Tyler Algier. So Najee Harris is just primed, for he and Warren both had good fantasy games last year. Even each had one great fantasy game last year, and that's with some of the worst quarterback play, pretty bad offensive line play, and the worst coordinator maybe of all time. So it's just an upgrade across the board in all those areas, and I really think the beneficiaries are Harrison and Warren, but kind of all the offense pieces. And really, I mean, Pickens' price is a little higher than it was a year ago, but not by much. And everyone else has kind of gone down. The second receiver, Roman Wilson versus Deontay Johnson, is way down. Pat Fryermuth's down. And of course, quarterback is way down. Russ compared to Pickett, and Naj and even kind of Warren's kind of around where he was a year ago. So it's not even like you're paying a higher price, even though everything around this situation has gotten better. So that's one of the reasons why I love it.
Yeah, I agree. I've been big into this whole entire Steelers offense. Rarely do I take a quarterback. I don't take Justin Fields. I know some people do. I am kind of just at this point of the season listening to what the coaches say, and Wilson is the starter. And I do believe his pedigree will show out with a better offensive coordinator. So I'm playing it like that too. So yeah, I've been very high on the Steelers offense. Like you said, mainly Najee and the receivers. The draft we just drafted Fryermuth. So yeah, I really do like this Steelers offense. And to the point about Pickens' price, it is a little higher than you're comfortable with. I will say that, but let's not forget, this man is capable of some massive spike weeks. He brought it home for people last year in the best ball playoffs, and definitely I think could do that in this offense. I mean, do you see him? I think you mentioned he could play that like AJ Brown role of this offense.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like, keep in mind, look at what happened last year when it was a couple weeks after they fired, I can't remember the terrible offense coordinator they had to start the year, or way too long last year. But
Matt
Canada. Thank you.
Yeah.
But then the bigger thing was it was the quarterback change. Just Mason Rudolph. We're talking Mason Rudolph unlocked George Pickens.
Yeah.
It was those games at the end when Mason Rudolph was throwing him the ball that he had those big games.
That's right.
So you mean to tell me that Russ or even Justin Fields isn't an improvement over that? I mean, under a better offensive coordinator with a better offensive line, et cetera. So
yeah, no, I'm in on the Steelers with you. I fully agree. So we've got two more. Please like this episode, subscribe to the Fanspeak Network to make sure you catch all our shows, both 4 or 5 live drafts a week and plenty of other strategy shows like this. So 2 more to go. Number 2, Steve, you have the one that I've been drafting an excessive amount of, and that is Brian Callahan and the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, he's coming over from being the offensive coordinator with the Bengals. That's incredibly enticing. Sounds like they could be a little pass heavier. So tell me about the whole picture, why this is number 2 for you and how you're handling it in best ball.
Yeah, so Brian Callahan, he was the offense coordinator for the Bengals. He was not the play caller, and it sounds like he's doing exactly what Zach Taylor did. He's going to, be the head coach and play caller for the Tennessee Titans. He also got his dad, Bill Callahan, legendary offensive line coach and just offensive coach in general, to be his offensive line coach. And just in general, Will Levis, who we saw had a couple good games, decent games down the stretch last year. They already have, some young guys in Tajay Spears, Chigga Okonkwo, veteran top receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. And then they go out and they add Calvin Ridley. They add Tyler Boyd, who obviously knows this offense, working under Brian Callahan. They also been adding offensive line. They added last year in the draft. They added this year in the draft and in free agency.
Top 10 this year, yeah.
Yeah, which has been another, which has been a big issue for this team the last couple of years. So they've, similar to the Steelers, they've bolstered their O-line. They just have a ton of pieces around a young, and just now have a ton of pieces around this young quarterback. And yeah, I think they're, all the comments have come out. We've heard from the coordinator, we've heard like Chig has made comments, a few others like, oh yeah, we're going to be throwing more. Offense
Yeah.
coordinators are, when they talk about, they added Tony Pollard, replacing Derrick
Yeah.
Henry. So it's Pollard and Spears now, the backfield. And when you hear the coordinator and Callahan talk about their running backs, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, they don't talk about them as runners. They talk about what they can
Yeah.
do in matchups against linebackers and how
Yeah.
we can throw them out of the backfield and stuff like that. So, it's all about the pass.
Yeah.
And then Will Levis also offers some rushing upside, especially in
Hmm.
and around the goal line and red zone. So he just makes a very intriguing late stack, especially with some of these elite weapons, and then backstacking with guys like Tyler Boyd and Chigakonkwu. In the draft that we just did,
Hmm.
live draft, we drafted Tyler Boyd, and I mentioned with the Bengals last 3 years, operating as the Bengals #3 receiver. Boyd has been a top 50 receiver last year, even with everything that went wrong with Cincinnati, including Jake Browning, basically being the quarterback the last last third of the season. He was a top 50 receiver. The 2 years prior, when he did have Joe Burrow, he was a top 30 receiver. So you're getting him in the last round of drafts.
Yeah.
That's just an absolute steal. Ridley and Hopkins, yeah, you're paying a higher price, but it's not prohibitive.
It's not in a super high. The price tag is not too much. In fact, I think they're
No,
all underpriced.
agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. So while you're taking a drink, I joke that I have like a Titans problem. I have remember the Titans. I have a Titans problem. I have a Will Levis stacking problem. I just love drafting the Titans and Will Levis stacks because they are so cheap and they are or so undervalued or too cheap for where they're going for the guys in the middle. Like you've got, Pollard, Spears, going in that like what 90 to 100 something range.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the receivers going in that like 60 to 80 range in Ridley and Hopkins. Like to me, it's too cheap on all of them. It's too cheap on all of them.
Yeah.
You can get Levis in like the 15th round, 15th or 16th round, Chig in 16th, 17th round, somewhere around there, and Boyd in the last round. Like to me, the whole entire offense is underpriced and too cheap.
Yeah.
And this just feels like a situation. I'm not saying it's going to be like the Texans or something like that, but I'm just saying it feels like a situation where it has the potential to way outperform their ADP. Not just one player, not just two, but like most of this offense could outperform their ADP and be a totally undervalued offense that we want access to. And that's how I'm handling it.
Yeah, I completely agree. They might not end up a true top 10 offense
Right.
at the end of the year, but I think they're going to vastly outperform ADP basically across the board.
Well, and similar, and maybe it takes a little bit like the Packers, let's say, and that's something that we're still finding. Yeah, like I was looking at an article I did and talking about Luke Musgrave and how the Packers offense grew throughout the year. And you look at it and, the Packers ended up, I think Jordan Love ended up like the total passing touchdowns was very high, but like a lot of the other offensive metrics, they were like 10th through 12th. Like they finished like right outside the top 10. But when you think about it, that last third of the season, it was wheels up and they were a top 10, top 5 offense. Like they were just absolutely elite the last third quarter of the season. And they were the offense you wanted access to. And in best ball, that's incredibly attractive to get access to an offense that's ascending throughout the season and hitting its peak at the end of the season. So, that's something, if they could be like a Packers like that, like maybe the first quarter of the season, you might be like, oh, is this going to be okay? But, new coordinator, a lot of new pieces, maybe it gels together similar to the Packers and it hits when the time's right. And so be patient with it. I hope they stay healthy, and I hope it's everything that I think it can be under this coach and this personnel. So I think that was a great ranking, number 2. So that'll take us to our last one, Steve. And for your number 1 offensive coordinator change and an offense that you're high on, that would be Zach Robinson and the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, you have Kirk Cousins coming over, what he does to elevate everybody from Bijan Robinson in his second year, Drake London in his third year, Kyle Pitts in his fourth or fifth year. So, I mean, what he does to elevate all these young guys is just insane. They bring in Darnell Mooney. I love the whole offense. I'm drafting it a ton already. You do have to pay a high price for Drake London and Bijan, obviously, first round or early second round. But everybody else, I mean, I'm shocked how cheap honestly, Pitts and Kirk Cousins are. And then Mooney, a spike week guy, is very, very reasonable price. So great prices on this offense. I love this offense too. Tell me why you love it so much, and the coordinator itself.
Yeah. So again, talk about perfect marriage. You have they already had the elite weapons from their previous 3 drafts, in Bijan, London, and Pitts. They go out, they get Cousins, they get Mooney, they even trade for Rondell Moore. They have Tyler Algier already on the team, and yeah, now their offensive coordinator is Zach Robinson. Zach Robinson coaching under with the Rams. Under Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell. That's who, Kirk Cousins was just with Kevin O'Connell with the Vikings last couple of years. And of course, Sean McVay with Washington, where he broke out. So you just have a situation who Kirk Cousins is going to have a lot of familiarity with Robinson and his style. And Robinson is going to have a lot of familiarity with Kirk Cousins. He's going to be able to reach out to guys like McVay and O'Connell and just be like, hey, what do I need to do with this guy? And I think it's just going to be all on the same page from day one. I see no reason why it wouldn't be. They already have a strong offensive line. They play indoors. They have a good playoff schedule.
Yeah.
It's just all comes together for this team. And the thing that has been holding back these Falcons players is obviously efficiency, volume, etc. That all changes with Cousins. I mean, Cousins, we've seen his offenses have just consistently produced multiple key fantasy pieces. Whether it's, you go back to Washington, he had 1 year with like 3,000-yard receivers and a good tight end. With the Vikings, he had consistently had 2 really good receivers, Diggs and Thielen, then Jefferson and Thielen, sometimes with a good tight end. And a good running back in Dalvin Cook. So we know that multiple guys can be getting there and being elite weapons. So guys like London and Bijan can absolutely be paying off those first round tags. And Kyle Pitts paying off where he's at. And yeah, Mooney, I think, is a great spike week guy. And I don't mind, taking, late shots at an Algier to fill in, or even an 18th round Rondell Moore. If you just need a eighth, ninth receiver for your type of build, because he's going to be the slot guy. Again, Zach Robinson coming over from Sean McVay. Sean McVay loves using motion, loves using slot guys. I think they'll find creative ways to use Rondell Moore. So, and there's nobody beyond those 3 receivers. The depth chart is threadbare beyond that. So. This is another situation. We know the exact guys who are getting the ball. We have a top 10 quarterback who, when he got hurt last year, Cousins was the 6th quarterback in fantasy. And there's every reason to believe he can be right back at that.
Right. And speaking of the Shanahan tree, and I think this was what I was thinking about earlier. I mean, this is one off the Shanahan tree coming from under Sean McVay. Like you said, we could expect a ton of motion and number one, and using Bijan more creatively. Number 2, we've heard him make quotes about he's gonna kind of be like the McCaffrey of this Falcons offense. I mean, that has to make Bijan and the entire offense more appealing. Like you said, from just even the use of motion and the creativity, right?
Oh yeah, and just scoring opportunities. I mean, this team just flamed out so many times where they just couldn't convert. They couldn't convert third downs. I mean, they have these elite weapons, and they couldn't get the ball to London. They couldn't get the ball to Pitts. Bijan, he'd get 1 carry, he'd break it off for 7 yards, and then it's like 2 incompletes, and they punt. And it's just like so frustrating. That's just not going to happen near the same frequency anymore. So you're just going to see so many more extended drives, scoring drives, red zone opportunities. So all these guys are just going to get more and more opportunities to put up fantasy points that they've just not had.
Yeah, you and I are both high on it. Like you said, everything's coming up. Falcons, the schedule, the playoff schedule, the playing indoors, the coaching change, the personnel. It's why Kirk Cousins wanted to go there. Why we, and quite honestly, he's going way too cheap. So I love it all. I'm in on it all. This has been a fun show. This has helped me, Steve. I mean, again, I'll repeat the top 5. We had 13 coaching changes that we went through. all of them, and I recommend going through all of them. I'll try to timestamp this, but we went through the top 5, and it was Steve's top 5 of offensive coordinator changes as a whole, and what not just the coordinator ranked, but the coordinator and the offense, and what that does for wanting to kind of get access to them in best ball. It was Steve's rankings go number 5, Clint Kubiak and the Saints; number 4, Ryan Grubb and the Seahawks; number 3, Arthur Smith and the Steelers; number 2, Brian Callahan and the Titans; and number 1, Zach Robinson and the Falcons. Steve, any final thoughts before we get out of here? This has been fun.
No, I think just keep these in mind, and some of the other ones I mentioned who didn't make the list, like for instance, we talked about the Eagles, Kellen Moore, love it. It's just the price was high already, so I didn't really move the needle for any of these guys.
Right. But yeah, we talked through all 13, and again, check out the whole entire show to hear all 13 and the impacts, because there are plenty of other offenses that we're very interested in. Like the Eagles, you just have to pay a price on, but there's some that, like, the Chargers or Patriots, where you might get some nice value pieces, or, Commanders, you might just want a couple pieces because it just might be the way you want it. The Panthers are another late one. I mean, nobody's expensive, literally nobody. And everybody should ascend what they did, last year. So there's definitely a lot of other offenses we're interested besides those top 5. And then some where you just may want one piece, like a Devontae Adams, So I think this has been super helpful for me. Hopefully it's been super helpful for you. Again, like this episode, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Fanspeak Network and check out all of our free content on fanspeak.com. This has been a lot of fun. Be sure to keep checking out Fanspeak Network, 4 to 5 live drafts a week, and more of these strategy shows every single week, because best ball season is ramping up and we love it. So this has been fun. For Steve, I'm Meg, and we will see you next time.